Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, your snapshot to the week's biggest economic and business developments, their impact, relevance. Joining me today is a friend and a long-time journalist, Priya Ranjan Dash, who has tracked the economic scenario as well as the business sector for years. Welcome to the show. Our first story, India's GDP grew at 4.7% between October and December 2013, as per the official figures released on Friday. That's a blow to claims that a recovery was taking root in the second half of this fiscal year. The figure is substantially lower than 5.2% that the finance minister had talked about. Here is a report.
This 4.7% GDP growth figure for the third quarter comes thanks to better performance in agriculture and service sectors. Industry has fared miserably. This is the seventh quarter in a row where growth has remained below the 5% mark. Looking back, the GDP growth has registered just 4.4% in the first quarter of this fiscal, that's April to June 2013. It grew at 4.8% in the July to September quarter, but has dipped again to 4.7% in Q3. Growth in the first 9 months between April and December 2013 was 4.6% compared to 4.5% in the same period a year ago. The only silver lining, the agriculture sector expanded 3.6% between October and December compared to 0.8% in the corresponding period of the previous fiscal. For the good news, financing, insurance, real estate and business services registered a significant growth of 12.5% in the third quarter over the corresponding period of the previous fiscal. Community, social and personal services grew 7%, electricity, gas and water supply services grew 5%, and trade, hotels, transport and communication services grew 4.3% during October to December period compared to the same period last fiscal. Industrial output including manufacturing and mining, which contribute around 1/4 of India's $1.8 trillion economy, contracted at rates of between 1.3% and 0.6% during the October to December period. Due to the high rate of interest and sluggishness in demand, economic growth rate has nearly halved in comparison with the growth witnessed in boom years of the past decade. Government had fast-track clearances to the projects worth over $80 billion in the past year, but it failed to revive the growth. Given the performance in the first 9 months, the economy must grow by 5.7% in the fourth quarter to achieve the growth target of 4.9% as forecast by Central Statistical Organization. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
That's quite a grim picture. I'm sure you will agree with me for the fact that you really require, as they say in cricket parlance, a run rate of 5.7% in the last quarter, which definitely looks almost impossible at this rate. Let's come to the good news, since that's a small thing first, before we go to the actual figures, which really have seem to have really drawn the picture. Agriculture seems to have really revived compared to last year. Your first thoughts on that, Mr. Dash?
Well, agriculture is primarily a weather phenomena.
Sure.
This year you have had good weather, so you have a growth rate. In recent years, agriculture actually has done better than, say, the previous, the trend growth rate.
Right.
So if you look at the 5-year trend growth rate, last 5 years, it's been higher than the previous period.
Right.
So agriculture,
but you don't think the growth is as much that it can outdo the others, because
well, that's what I was coming to. Agriculture, the share in GDP overall is 16%.
Right.
So if the target normally for agricultural growth has been 4% that the Planning Commission and everybody has been targeting. So with 4% growth, with a share of 16% in overall GDP, agriculture is not going to take you very far.
Right.
And in terms of creation of jobs also, agriculture has very limited potential. In fact, more labor should be displaced from the agricultural sector
as we move up.
As you move up. So it's manufacturing which has to create job. Unfortunately, it's manufacturing which is doing so badly.
So let's come to the really the grim side, the fact that despite all the push by the government, and we've seen that, you know, various policy measures, of course, talking up, I mean, the Commerce Minister, the Finance Minister, even the industry, I mean, they keep highlighting the fact that manufacturing has to go up. What to your mind is the basic reason which is really not helping manufacturing grow at the moment? I mean, yes, there's a general doom situation, etc. But if you could have to list out what are the reasons that are really not allowing manufacture to move out of that zone of negativity, how would you say that?
Well, if you look at the immediate cause, there is a slackening of investment demand. So that's for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Including reasons of projects clearances, reasons of interest rates, and all kinds of, and also one has to look at the consumer demand, which has slackened in several sectors because of aggressive, monetary policy. But that's the immediate reason. But overall, if you look at India as a manufacturing place, there are several reasons why manufacturing is doing so badly, including and mainly a very poor infrastructure. So,
hasn't that been a story for us for years
exactly
together?
for years.
Yeah.
And in fact, I believe that we could be chasing up actually a mirage in terms of looking at raising our manufacturing share of manufacturing in the overall GDP. And
that's worrisome.
You know, I would like to argue that since in the Indian economy, which is a unique economy in the sense that services today account for more than 60% of the GDP. So if services have done well in the past, now they are not doing well. That's how you have the overall growth rate dropping to 4.5, 4.6.
So you think a push on services would be a better idea in the given till we come up as far as infrastructure is concerned?
Is it traditionally one would believe that from agriculture you move to manufacturing, and from manufacturing
so
you move to services?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you have already leapfrogged, I would say that instead of chasing a vain dream like manufacturing, shouldn't we be focusing more on services and see that in recent months and years where services growth has slackened.
Yeah. So
should you be addressing issues in services for quicker revival?
I was just coming to that. It's interesting that you're saying that maybe there is a need to relook our way we want to push the economy. Maybe we need to really put more focus on services. But you, in the same breath, you mentioned that services have fallen, which we've seen from where it was. Now, to your mind, there were two quick questions which I wanted to know. If there's something that really can help services move up and move up dramatically, what is it that the government or industry or in the policy front that can be done?
Well, for services have, in the Indian context, part of the services are of course government services. Yeah. So if you have higher wages for government employees, then the services sector, the growth rate tends up. You have a pay commission kind of payout of 60,000 crore in area, and you will see services sector
bump up
growth.
In the services,
yes,
yeah.
But so I'm not talking about those kind of services. Even in this quarter, if you look at it very closely, the highest growth rate comes out of banking financial services. Now that's an artificial growth, because we know in this quarter ended December, there has been NRE deposits of over $35 billion which came in because RBI opened up a swap facility and the banks mobilized those deposits.
Sure.
Consequently, you have had over 12% growth in banking financial services. We are not looking at those kind of services really. So, but if you take a longer term view, what is it that you will require to stabilize services growth rate at over 10%?
Okay. So on that front, I think we will take a break at this point, but I think it's important to remember that we're looking at actually redrawing how we want to look at the economy growth. On that note, we'll come back soon. Welcome back. News now of some big ticket cabinet decisions just days ahead of the announcement of the general election schedule and kicking in on the model code of conduct. Central government employees and pensioners have got a 10% DA hike. Besides, clearances for some key health, education and infrastructure projects. Here's more.
Bonanza time for more than 80 lakh central government employees and pensioners. With a 10% hike that will come into effect from January this year, dearness allowance is now equal to the basic pay. This one comes close on the heels of the last DA hike just 5 months back. In addition to that jackpot, the government has cleared the Employee Pension Fund Organization's proposal to ensure a 1,000 rupee minimum monthly pension. 28 lakh pensioners, including 5 lakh widows, will gain from the decisions. The Cabinet also approved the terms of reference for the 7th Central Pay Commission, which was announced earlier. There's also a massive shot in the arm for urban infrastructure, especially in the metro rail sector. The Cabinet also approved the second phase of the metro rail project for Bangalore at a cost of 26,405 crore rupees. Also cleared is constitution of a railway tariff authority to enable streamlining and transparency of railway fares. The body would be subject to amendment of the Railway Act of 1989. Towards decongesting the National Capital Region of heavy vehicle movement, the Cabinet cleared the Eastern Peripheral Expressway project. The expressway would enable heavy vehicles to bypass Delhi to reach Haryana or Uttar Pradesh. In the telecom sector, the Union Cabinet finalized the spectrum usage charges for 1800 and 900 MHz bands. For spectrum acquired in the recently concluded auction, the government has decided to charge 5% of adjusted gross revenue. Those companies that did not acquire spectrum in the recent auction will continue to pay as per the existing slabs. Other companies holding spectrum acquired in this round of auction and the spectrum acquired earlier will pay on weighted average basis. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
You know, I was just thinking about this a little while before. When we are talking of economy, can we really divorce economy from politics? And the cabinet decisions this time looks like it has run into some political decisions. I know it's a subject of what we say is the current pay, or it's cyclical, which needs to happen in touch with inflation. But can we just elaborate on what you think of a timing of the decision as well as the huge bonanza that has been announced?
Well, this one about raising the DA, you know, you can't say that it's timing, because the timing is determined by, you know, almost the government is obliged by the Pay Commission report to give the employees periodical DA revisions linked to inflation. And since inflation has been high, you have had the necessity of raising the DA. So that of course is there. Which was political was the decision that was taken a few days before to constitute another pay commission for central government employees. And that was surely a political decision, because a pay commission affects say 20 million people who are employees, and their direct dependents, if you look at the family of 5, so then you have 100 million people who are directly can look up to a hike in their
but don't you think that we've I mean, the DA, I can understand, as you're saying, is linked to inflation, and if inflation has been going through the roof, as we've seen, there was a case for the DA to be announced now, or you know, very soon. But what about the other, you know, kind of steps they have announced as far as health is concerned, education is concerned, infrastructure is concerned? You know, these are areas which definitely looks, you know, you're not going to see much of action. These are more of policy announcements which the government is trying to make, and this, as we expect the election dates to be announced next week.
That's right. Yeah. Particularly in the social sector, the government is trying to catch up with its act that it should have moved much before, during its term, and actually implemented, as you say.
Exactly.
You know, programs, instead of now deciding policy and leaving that to the government which will be incoming, that's not such a great idea. That's why you will have the model code of conduct placed very soon.
Exactly.
So,
but
government has a very narrow window and it's taking advantage of it.
Right.
Our ruling establishment does that invariably.
Yeah, but I was just coming to this. Don't you think that, the voters have matured now? And as we see, people do see through these announcements which come in the last week or 10 days before the code kicks in. And don't you think the government instead should have tom-tommed about its delivery, maybe about its records of what it has done over with the policies that they had announced, instead of going with another slew of announcements at this end of the term?
You're right that of late the voter has shown tremendous amount of maturity. Just in the recent state assembly elections, if you look at Rajasthan, for instance, where so many of those populist steps had been announced, not just before the election, but a few months before the election, didn't quite work, including free medicine and, the grain scheme and everything that the Rajasthan Gehlot government had done led to its complete debacle in the election. So you are right, the voter has matured. And people understand why it is being done at whatever time.
And I think you are right that it's kind of unfair for the next government in a way, because with the policies you announce, you're also entailing some sort of a spend by the government. It's for any new government to come and inherit policies which has not really kicked off, but which will require you to, they will either, turn it back, which is not good, or they will have to allot funds towards those schemes or policies which may not be the priority or the way a new government would want to look at things.
This is particularly unfortunate because these are coming after an interim vote on account.
Exactly.
Interim budget has been presented. Now, an interim budget itself, the norms are that the government, outgoing government, which is presenting an interim budget, is not supposed to be introducing new schemes and policies. So, in the interim government, the government stuck to those principles, but now, in this small window that they have got before the model code of conduct kicks in, they are trying to do whatever best they can do.
Yeah, but we did see them having a more wiser note as far as the ordinances were concerned. We did hear that there would be some ordinance which they would take to, which we found that the cabinet.
Well, we don't know whether it is completely out of the way. Means clearly the government has had cold feet.
Okay.
Yes. Because of the propriety involved in the whole exercise. Now, a government, of course, these legislations were planned for quite some time, but the government failed to deliver it. It's actually failure of the polity, I would say, to reach a consensus and to deliver on these very important legislations.
I think on that note, we need to really look at political parties definitely will need to relook as to what they should be doing in the last window. Voters have matured. They do understand why you do these, why you take, and it's probably improper for the new government to be burdened with policy decisions taken at the end of one's tenure, particularly after you've presented the vote on account. At a break at this time, we'll come back with the last segment after this. Welcome back, and this time for the electricity sector. The weak electricity regulator CERC issued fresh orders to rationalize incentives for public sector power generation companies. The new order could eventually help distressed electricity distribution companies and encourage the use of more efficient technology. It follows the CERC's last week order to temporarily allow private players like the Tatas and Adanis to increase tariff on account of rise in input costs.
The CERC is linking incentives to the plant load factor instead of the current plant availability factor. This would mean that incentives will be directly linked to the amount of power actually produced rather than the company's capacity to produce power. The order could directly impact the profit of public sector units like the NTPC, the NHPC and the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam. Experts, however, feel the decision will help distribution companies.
I think this would mean that they should be able to find more and more customers for their power and maybe sell power also at a little lower rate. However, I think it is clearly an attempt to give some relief to the distribution companies.
The CERC has also reduced the heat energy ratio by 2%. It would allow incentives on reducing the use of coal to produce power. Earlier, power producers could burn more coal and charge electricity buyers for it. The CERC also reduced the auxiliary consumption of power generation companies from 21.5% to 12% to claim incentives. Auxiliary power is the power consumed by plants to produce electricity and included in tariff. The measures will encourage the use of efficient and more environment-friendly technology and help end users.
These are all directed towards making power more affordable for the consumer. And the tariff particularly, you see, which is in recent times, the gap between the revenue realized as well as the tariff that you're getting, that is certainly been weighing on all regulators' minds, and I think they try to tighten the efficiency norms.
The power sector has struggled with weak demand, and the CERC's latest orders could usher in a new era of reforms. In the December quarter, plant availability factor increased 3%, but the plant load factor or actual demand came down because debt-ridden state discoms could not buy it. Krishnanand Tripathi's report for Rajya Sabha Television.
So, we are discussing something which I think we've been discussing for ad nauseum, the electricity sector. As we know, CERC has come out with two very, very significant orders. The one which came last week was perhaps an opening to a new thing, because you're actually opening up contracts which you had signed for a certain tariff, and now that input costs have gone up, you've actually gone back to revise those tariff orders. Secondly, I think they found a way to kind of incentivize PSUs or public sector power companies and thereby help the distressed distribution companies. My focus would be how do these orders really go about helping distribution companies, because we know that's the weak link in the chunk even today, even after these many years of reforms. Your first thoughts on that?
Well, you see, the key to it is the tariff that the consumer pays, a different category of consumer.
Right.
And that is the key to the financial viability of the sector. Okay? Competitive tariff that is agreed upon, and you have the agreement. And on that basis, the generating companies are generating. If the input costs have gone up, as they did in case of coal, for instance, including imported coal.
Sure.
And the growing dependence on imported fuel because of the domestic mismanagement of the resources that we've had. Now, these things keep burdening the entire sector. So every time you have a situation where a lot of public institutional finance is locked up in projects, and many of them turning out to be non-performing assets, causing concern on that side, on the side of the financial viability. And on this side, you've not had the quick or the fast addition to capacity,
but do you think
both generation and distribution, that you would ideally like to have in terms of to boost the energy supply to the consumers?
But do you think there's something wrong really in the structure, in the sense, coal prices going up or gas prices going up or reserves not really playing out, as we've seen in the case of natural gas? Coal also has been stranded because of other issues. If input costs really truly go up, is it fair to expect that tariffs will remain the same, Or is it, do you think, a clause or a provision that shouldn't be built into the agreement that, you know, there is a band, just like we have inflation-linked stuff, to have some sort of a cushion which the consumer has to pay? I mean, this is a genuine case of, I'm saying a genuine case when if we take really prices going up, where the consumer has to pay if the input cost goes up. Do you think we should accommodate such a thing right from the beginning and not wait for an order somewhere midstream to kind of do the corrective step?
I think you're absolutely right. You know, the whole system has to be market-based, based on market principles. And the regulating system has to be such that ensures that the market is, you know, there is a fair market out there, there is a level playing field out there, and the rules are being followed. The market rules are being followed.
That's right.
What we have had is we've experimented with the regulatory system as well as with the policies, which are you know, partly market driven and partly administrative.
You know, you're a person who has tracked this sector for long, and you would remember the kind of waiver packages we have seen. We saw that many years earlier when the Planning Commission waived off the distribution, the losses of the SEBs. We saw a recent one, which was again about 1 lakh crore or odd about that. Now, again, a slew of incentives to help the distressed, you know, is this just
Soma,
going on
every
feeding?
time you know this, every time there has been a bailout package which has been given, it has had the conditions of certain reforms, measures that those who are taking the bailout are supposed to carry out. What has happened is you have had this debt waiver and the bailouts, but you haven't had those market reforms in the sector at the desired pace and at the desired time.
Yeah.
So there has always been this lag, and every time you have an accumulative problem which blows off, you know.
Right.
And then suddenly you are facing complete darkness.
Right. On that note, and that's quite a grim note, I must admit, we've not had really the best of times this week. We've had a bad GDP number, which should actually be, which has sent wrong notes to the market. We've had an electricity sector which is tried to be pushed up through these late-minute incentive, which, as was pointed out, is not the recourse for proper reforms. And finally, the cabinet actually hurrying to take some decisions to show that they are a government in action. Political economy surely seems to be taking over the sense now, with elections around the corner and the dates likely to be announced very soon. On that note, we close this show today. To come back again, thank you and good night.